Hi everybody, it's Derek from the Open Source Technology Improvement Fund, and today we're going to learn about hidden operating systems and how to set up a Windows 7 hidden OS in VeraCrypt. First, we're going to start out with showing off the results so that we can see if this is something that you guys want to try or if it is one to skip. This is pretty amazing, so I don't think I would want to skip this one. So if we take a look at these results clips, the first step is our VeraCrypt Bootloader, which if you've seen the other videos, you're already familiar with this. It's the password that you enter in order to be able to load Windows. And what's unique about this setup is depending on which password you enter into this bootloader, you can enter a fake operating system or your real hidden operating system, and there's no way to tell that there is a hidden operating system on this computer. So we begin by entering the password for the fake operating system. Now this is going to check the password, confirm that it's okay, decrypt the partition, and then load the fake operating system, which we can see here. So once we are inside of this fake operating system, it looks just like a full disk encrypted VeraCrypt operating system. You can see on the C drive here that there is a 40 gigabyte partition. It's encrypted with AES. Now I'm going to mount the other partition, which looks like it's just an encrypted drive. Once we mount this partition, it will look like a large empty storage drive. And once mounted, it will actually assign it a drive letter. Drive E, you can see it's 193 gigabytes here. And if I open it up, I've placed some files in there just so you can see that you can actually read and write from this second partition. This second partition also contains the hidden operating system. Now because this second partition, called the outer volume, has been filled with random encrypted data, including all of the free space, it's impossible to tell what data is actually on this drive, and this is where we've hidden our hidden operating system. So next we're going to reboot the computer and show what it looks like when we enter the other password, which will load our hidden Windows 7 operating system. So here we've rebooted and we're back at the VeraCrypt bootloader, and I'm going to enter the password that I created for my hidden operating system, and this will make VeraCrypt load the hidden operating system from the other partition automatically. We can see that the username is different. I'm going to enter a different password to get into the desktop. And then once we load the hidden operating system, I also change the background and the theme so that we can see that this is a completely separate install of Windows. Now there's two big advantages to this hidden operating system setup. One is the obvious one. You have privacy control over your data that's on your machine. But the second advantage is that it also makes your Windows installation tamper resistant. We have heard stories about people going through customs or border control, and they will take your computer behind closed doors, do an unknown thing to it, and then return it to you. This guarantees that they are unable to modify your Windows installation without simply destroying it. So now let's get into what is actually required and what materials you're going to need in order to do this setup. You will need a PC that is capable of partitioning a hard drive. You will need a hard drive with at least 250 gigs of space. You'll need a thumb drive with Windows 7, or you can use other versions of Windows, but you would need VeraCrypt 1.20 or greater, which is not yet out at the time of this recording. And you will need lots of time. This takes hours and hours to set up, but most of it is in the form of loading screens. So you just have to know the important steps and have some time to set aside in order to fully encrypt your drive. I'm doing this on VeraCrypt version 1.19, which means I don't have support for GPT, which is a special kind of partitioning that is supported in later versions of Windows. If you are also trying to do this in the same version of VeraCrypt, you will need to have a motherboard that can disable EFI. This is because if you're using EFI or AHCI, Windows will automatically try to use GPT rather than ask you whether to use the older master root record versus the new GPT. And finally, you must use magnetic storage drives. You should not use an SSD or anything that contains flash memory for this guide. This is because newer SSDs have garbage collection and wear leveling built into them that leaves areas of the drive unreadable and unwritable. And these features make it extremely difficult to ensure that when you format a partition that all of the data is actually destroyed and overwritten. So you can see here that I'm doing the partitioning in Disk Manager, and you can see that I am deleting the existing partitions on the drive and setting up two new partitions. One will contain the dummy operating system, and the other will contain the outer volume and the hidden operating system. Now, it's extremely important to know that if you are using NTFS, the hidden operating system partition must be at least 2.5 times larger than the one for the dummy operating system. There are some technical reasons for that that are not worth getting into for the scope of this video. So you can also see that I am creating a 40 gigabyte main drive for our dummy Windows operating system, and I'm using the rest of the space on the drive for the other partition. This meets our 2.5 times as large requirement, and I'm also formatting all partitions with NTFS. Now that we have prepped this drive by partitioning it and formatting both of the partitions, we can shut down the computer and disconnect the main hard drive that has this Windows operating system on it and begin the setup of our dummy and hidden operating system. So for the rest of this video, we are not using the main Windows installation on this computer. We can just disconnect and remove that hard drive. Or if you're doing it on a separate computer, we can now complete all of the steps on the main PC that's going to have the dummy and hidden operating systems. So now we are getting ready to boot up with only our hard drive attached. And we do this by making it so that our flash drive will be the boot device, and we disable AHCI in the case of my motherboard in order to allow VeraCrypt to work properly. Next, we are going to go through the Windows install process for the smaller of the two partitions. Now what we're actually doing here is we are creating the hidden operating system, which will then be copied into the outer volume partition later. So we're just going to use some general setup settings for Windows 7. Nothing special is going to go on here. Eventually Windows is going to want to restart, and when it does, we have to go back into the BIOS and set the hard drive as the boot device. That way it doesn't keep booting into Windows setup on the USB drive. So after rebooting, we're going to continue doing our standard Windows 7 setup. You're going to create usernames and passwords and so on and so forth. We're going to skip over a couple of these screens for the sake of the length of this video. So next we've installed VeraCrypt, and we're going to begin the process of installing the hidden operating system to the outer volume. So the first step is we're going to select Create Volume. And then we're going to select Encrypt the system partition or entire system drive, Hidden Operating System. You're going to go through a few dialog boxes. And then it's going to warn you about Windows using the other partition for a paging file. If you click the Yes option during this warning, it's going to disable that paging file and then reboot to stop Windows from using that area for paging. So after the reboot, we're going to open VeraCrypt and go to the same settings that we did prior. But now that the problem with virtual memory is corrected, it will allow us to continue. We have to make sure that we're selecting the single boot option here because we are only going to have one fake operating system. If we were going to have more than one, we would need to select the multi-boot option. Now VeraCrypt is going to create the outer volume, which is it's taking the larger of the two volumes and it's going to create a fully encrypted partition there. This needs to be done before it integrates the encrypted hidden operating system into that partition. Now for this example, I'm using short passwords, but you're going to want to use long, high entropy passwords for this. The file system is up to preference. I selected NTFS because that is what Windows uses by default. So I want this to look as genuine as possible. You can use exFAT if you want to use the excuse, well, I have Linux systems or I have an Apple OS X system that doesn't read NTFS. Now we've begun the encryption process, and this takes a very long time depending on the options that you've selected. So in my case, this is a relatively small partition. It's going to take about 45 minutes, but if you've got a partition that's multiple terabytes, it could take multiple hours to complete. So we've just created the outer volume area, and this is going to be a section of the drive that appears to be an encrypted container, but it will actually contain the entire hidden operating system. In order to make this convincing, we need to put some files inside of this container so we can enter the outer volume password and we'll actually see some files in there as if this is being used. It won't just be empty. And then we're going to go through the process of installing the hidden operating system to this area. So you'll see me just putting some files in here, and that's just to confirm the process. Normally you would want to keep some actual data in here that looks like data that you would want to be encrypted, and this is so that to a casual observer this is encrypted data that you're trying to protect and not garbage data. Next, we are going to go through the process of installing the actual hidden operating system. First, we have to select the hidden volume encryption options. Then we have to select the password that's going to protect it. And you want a strong password for your hidden operating system. Now we're going to have to build entropy like always with random mouse movements. Now the hidden volume has been created, and the operating system is going to be copied into the hidden volume. So we have now rebooted, and we need to enter our hidden operating system password, and then VeraCrypt will copy the current Windows installation into the hidden operating system folder. This process can also take a long time depending on the size of the Windows installation and the amount of software that you have installed, among some other factors like the encryption settings. Once it has completed copying, it should take you to the Windows sign-in screen. And then after signing in, you'll see some VeraCrypt pop-ups saying that your hidden operating system has started. The next step is we are going to wipe the smaller partition. That way our hidden operating system of Windows is erased from that partition. Now Now it is not only wiping the hard drive, but it is replacing all of the data with random data, which makes it impossible to recover. So our next step is to reboot again, and we are going to begin the process of creating our dummy operating system. So we have rebooted, and I've entered the BIOS to set our USB thumb drive to be our boot device so that we can once again install Windows. Now we are booting from the thumb drive, and we are starting over the Windows install process on the smaller partition. This is going to be our dummy operating system. Once we have finished those basic install steps, Windows is going to want to reboot again. After Windows reboots, we're going to want to enter the BIOS again and set the boot device back to the hard drive, because if we leave it at the USB thumb drive, it'll keep booting into Windows setup. Once we have set the HD to boot again, we will load into the final stages of Windows setup. After we complete those steps, we will reach the dummy Windows desktop for the first time. Now that we've completed the basic install of our dummy Windows, we want to install all of our updates and drivers. We want to install any general software that you want to have on dummy Windows, and you want to throw some files and applications on there to make it look like a genuine Windows install and not a fresh Windows install that you never use. Once we are satisfied with that, we are going to install VeraCrypt again, and we are going to begin the process of encrypting this operating system. Now what's important here is we have to make sure that the settings for the dummy operating system match the settings for the hidden operating system. And this is because the bootloader can't give away that there's a hidden operating system there, so it's going to use the exact same settings to check for it, and the only difference is the password. If the settings that you use for the full disk encryption on the dummy operating system do not match the hidden operating system, your hidden operating system will become inaccessible, and the only way to fix it will be to re-encrypt this dummy operating system with the correct settings. So it is very important that we get this step right. So once we have everything the way we want it, we're going to proceed with fully encrypting the dummy Windows. We do this by selecting the encrypt the entire partition option again. This is going to be normal encryption, not hidden operating system encryption, because this is our dummy Windows install, which is not hidden. We are being careful to match our encryption settings with the hidden operating system. Again, this is just a demonstration, so I'm using short passwords. Use strong high entropy passwords. Once the keys are generated, it's going to try to make you create a rescue disk. The rescue disk makes it so if the bootloader becomes damaged, you can still recover your data without losing everything. Then we go into test mode, which will reboot your computer again, and you will need to enter the password that you set up for your dummy Windows partition. So we are now rebooting for VeraCrypt's encryption test, and we enter the password for our dummy Windows partition, and we load into Windows after the successful test. And then VeraCrypt will begin the encryption process after the successful test. So now we've completed the process of encrypting the dummy Win partition, and we have completed the project, and now we can actually look at the results. So here we can finally look at the results. First, we're going to load into dummy Windows using the dummy Windows password at our VeraCrypt bootloader when we first turn the computer on. And we're going to load into Windows, and we're going to open the outer encrypted partition, which contains some dummy files that we've thrown in there, but also contains the hidden operating system that no one can detect. And finally, we're going to enter our masterpiece hidden operating system, which we gain access to by entering the hidden operating system password at the bootloader. If this video helped you or you just like our cause, you can consider donating to us through Patreon or through a huge number of options at ostif.org/donate. These guide videos are just a small part of our activities. We get software audits so that everyone in the world can trust this free software, and we raise money to improve software through grants. I encourage you to head over to our website and check out all of the things that we do to make the free software world safer for everyone. Thank you.